To the people who have lived with these convictions, I want to say I'm sorry that our politicians are wimps, but more than that, that they're hypocrites. We have baseline data that shows that 80% of New Zealanders will use cannabis or try it by the time that they're 21 years old, and that includes a majority of our parliamentarians who now sit comfortably in a chamber overseeing a law that criminalises, prosecutes and ruins the lives of people who did exactly the same thing that they did. I want an Aotearoa New Zealand where nobody carries cannabis convictions, but more than that, I want a complete overhaul of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975. Since 1980, we have 124,000 convictions for low-level cannabis offences, basically possession and use. And the last year alone, 44% of cannabis convictions were applied to Māori. When you take that into account with the whole population being 15% Māori, you can come to see how this discrimination is really playing out. It was never actually about the drugs. I mean, if it was, you'd be taking a harm-based health intervention type of approach. This has always been about criminalising and prosecuting certain communities for utilisation of substances that are proliferated across demographics in our society. Perhaps most concerning is the data that shows that of the cannabis convictions in 2020 to 2021, 68% of those charges were for young people aged between 20 to 39. When you're talking about the impact of those convictions at the start of somebody's life, you're talking about impediments to getting access to education, to employment, to housing, to future opportunities, and definitely to travel. That is a massive barrier to young people getting their lives on the so-called straight and narrow, which is supposedly the point of these laws in the first place. This conversation has been reignited by the moves of the birthplace of the war on drugs, the United States of America, which several decades ago decided that we were going to try and eliminate drugs from planet Earth by criminally prosecuting as many people as we possibly could, but only if they came from largely poorer neighbourhoods and more structurally marginalised backgrounds. Of course, that did not work, and we're starting to see with the moves from the likes of Joe Biden, even that birthplace of the war on drugs is starting to admit failure. In a nutshell, if we were to wipe cannabis convictions tomorrow, we would have a far more equitable situation where we recognise the reality that it simply doesn't add up that 124,000 New Zealanders have been criminally prosecuted for low-level cannabis convictions in the past few decades, while 635,000 New Zealanders used cannabis just last year alone. People will say that legal regulation or decriminalisation is chaos, but what we have right now is chaos. We still spend 4 times as much money on criminal prohibition enforcement than we do on health-based interventions. And I think the question has to be who really benefits from criminal prosecution, because it's definitely not people who are actually struggling with addiction and abuse issues either.